Alright guys, Censor Comeback here, and today I hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. The CDL begins again tomorrow, but the Elite was going down last night, and Doug Martin was getting involved in what he believes is one of the greatest hardpoint comebacks in Call of Duty history, but he still managed to go on and lose the series. Scump Methodz are throwing a few digs in his way, especially interesting given Doug's criticisms over the last few days of Scump's Call of Duty career. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate a couple of juicy bits actually on the new map here on that Expo here, because we saw go down yesterday all the drama that was happening, and it is kind of continued forward today. Now, I know that people have been finding ways to spawn trap in private games, and look, in private games you can do basically anything and find ridiculous spawn traps. So even Bean says, I don't like the new map, but you know, do this in a actual proper lobby, and good luck with it, right? So there are some spawn traps that are possible, but anything like that happening is unlikely to be the case. I'll tip any pro team that's able to set this up, says Bance, but some teams certainly didn't want this to happen. We saw the tweet from Dominate where he said that it's outrageous that you know, a 6-6 vote is swinging in the way of actually changing it around. He deletes the tweet. I mean, I talked about yesterday, right, that if the teams didn't even practice the map, then they can't really complain or have a good reason to say that it should be gone, and that's the point that Octane makes here in a second. But even Marky B says, right, clearly Los Angeles Guerrillas didn't want it gone. Hicksy tweeted out like basically a middle finger to all of those who wanted to get Expo in and voted for it, and Mark says it makes zero sense. We're throwing in a map that actually might play worse than Fortress. I'd rather we tracked in Hydra at that point. At least the teams have callouts, so maybe they'd know if they actually practice it, right? And that's Octane's thoughts, as we'll see here in a second. And Scraps also doesn't like it, so there's an argument to say, and maybe this is valid, maybe it's not, that some of the better teams, the FaZes, the Thieves is, I think Vegas as well, okay, they're not particularly good at control, but they wanted Expo in and Fortress out. Not exactly sure what OpTic decided in the end, but they were happy to get Hydra control in rather than Fortress, and they're not particularly good at Fortress either, to be honest, based on their records. Does seem like some of the lower teams, right, the Londons maybe, the Los Angeles Guerrillas, some of the teams right down there at, you know, the lower end of the league, were pretty keen to keep Fortress around, and I guess the point would be, okay, it's a 50-50 coin toss map, and therefore the lower teams want it because it's a Mickey Mouse map type thing, which maybe there's some value to that argument. I'm not so convinced personally, because I actually do think there was a fair bit of a skill gap to Fortress. It wasn't good to play or to watch, but Beans is right here that New York are 8-1 on the map, and they were very good, New York, at getting the offensive ticks and getting the wins, so it was painful, but I don't know, I'm not sure if there's going to be more of a skill gap on Expo than there was on Fortress, but I guess we will have to wait and see. And I just wanted to share what Octane said, because my theory was, when we discussed it yesterday, that Octane and Thieves and FaZe had actually practiced it against each other. I believe they might have done it briefly, but they really hadn't played much. And Octane basically says almost none of the pros that voted in that vote to get Expo in over Fortress had actually played the map. I was under the impression that the teams that wanted it in probably had played it against each other and had actually decided that it was better, but it seems like even then not many of those teams did. I think even one day FaZe refused to scrim Thieves against it for some reason, despite FaZe wanting it in a couple of days later. Weird situation, but yeah, Octane effectively says not only did the teams that voted for Fortress to stay not even play Expo, but even the teams that wanted Expo in didn't even play Expo, which basically says, as he describes, that this is a pure exercise from the teams to choose a map regardless of how good or bad it is, just to benefit themselves. Thieves were probably quite happy to get Fortress out because they don't particularly like it, and he reckons that basically the entire decision-making process here was not based at all, because even Thieves, he says, don't really know if it's good or not, is what he implies. Like, they've just chosen to get it in because they don't like Fortress and everyone else is doing the same. So it's an absolute shambles, and it's you know, frustrating at times to see the type of guys that actually represent our scene on a professional level.
These votes were made without playing the map. That's the thing. I will state on the record that every single team that voted in this played the map less than 3 times. There is 0% chance that the votes that happened were made based on like actually playing the map, as opposed to like biased team by team. Because again, we asked every team to scrim the map that we had scrimmed for the past couple of days, and they all said no. There is so much bitching about the map pool, and then we have a map that gets dropped onto our lap, good or bad, which, by the way, we don't know because we have not scrimmed it at a professional level to determine if it is good or bad enough to replace Fortress with. Like, how insane is that, dude?
There was some talk here between Arcitys and Simp about, even back in Black Ops 4, there were some mega control spawn traps you could put in, but as Simp says, okay, yeah, you used to spawn in the mega deep frequency spawn trap, you could always get out. It was possible to get out back then, but yeah, there were some pretty outrageous spawn traps you could do back in the day as well, especially because Black Ops 4 was 5v5. So there were even more possibilities, I suppose, to lock down some of the lanes. Let's dive into this Doug Censor Martin situation then. So last night, there was a ridiculous comeback that happened with Doug. He had 7 kills at this time, but well, this was a ridiculous. I mean, okay, they're down 2-1 in the series. This is GG, right? It's over. 213 to 37. Reminds me a little bit of kind of what happened in the London versus OpTic series, where they went down pretty heavily on this very map in map 4. They made the comeback to win game 4. This against London right in the very first round in losers at their home major, and then they won the game 5. Now, unfortunately for Boston, though, they didn't win the game 5. But I mean, look at this, right? Down 213 to 37. And Boston get at the hard point, and they make an outrageous comeback to win this map here on Mikado. Like, I will agree that this is one of the craziest ever. Is this the best competitive COD hardpoint comeback? Now, it's an interesting question, right? Because probably in terms of pure numbers and deficit, it's got to be right up there. I mean, we saw the Vegas versus Thieves one, which is arguably one of the greatest ever. It's certainly in the conversation, the Vegas versus Thieves one at Major 3 for the conversation, and that was 208 to about 60. So this is around about 30 points more that Doug and co are coming back in. Now, at the end of the day, this is a Challengers Elite game. It's not a Pro League game. It's not a game that matters a huge amount in the grand scheme of things, and that's why it's always going to be on a lower, I don't think this is ever going to be going in, like we made a video just a couple of weeks ago on Breaking Point, right after the Vegas versus Thieves comeback to say, okay, what are the greatest hardpoint comebacks in COD history? We looked at a few across the last several years, and, this isn't probably going to be going in those compilations because it's a Challengers game. And we've seen before that public match players or even pro players have gone into like pub hardpoint lobbies, gone down 249 to 0, maybe even in ranked play and stuff, and made the comeback 250, 249. It's just something that's been done in the past for content. Of course, that's not on the competitive level like this is, but yeah, this is still remarkable. You've got to give credit to Boston Breach. I don't know how they managed to pull this off, the academy team, of course. An absolute full breakdown from the guys on the other side, especially spicy in a way because Doug is playing against Jimbo here, or like, Lau, who has always kind of been beefing him a little bit on Twitter over the last couple of weeks, but Lau does still manage to do so because he beats them game 5 anyway. So kind of incredible that Kremp drops 100 kills, 108 kills. Like Gravity had a great performance of 1.21. They somehow lost the game 4, but they still clutched up game 5, and Doug didn't have his greatest series ever. 0.62 for Doug, 58 kills, 93 deaths, not exactly his greatest performance, and even Lau says 12 kills a map, by the way. So, I mean, yeah, kind of putting the dagger in, I suppose, but still, this will be remembered more so because of the comeback, though, than the Orbit winning 3-2, but nonetheless pretty interesting. Now, I wanted to mention, though, because of this, there was all this talk the last few days between Scump and Censor. Well, Scump doesn't really get involved in this drama, but Censor will change his opinion every couple of weeks on who the greatest players of all time are, so he can get some interesting interactions. I'm pretty sure is his plan as a result. So we saw a couple of weeks ago that the Doug put Scump as his 7th all-time player. He put like a load of other people above Scump, and well, he's given his reasons for that here in a second. I thought it was interesting just because I was wondering when I was going to talk about this clip because it wasn't really worth an entire video on its own. But now that Doug's been talked about in challenges, and also now that Scump Methodz reacted a fair bit to his performance last night and how his team was getting on, and that Methodz was certainly roasting some of his plays a fair bit. And we also then get these comments from Doug on Scump's performance in his career over the last few days. Wanted to share it.
How's he looking, Abner? How's he looking?
Not great, but
no.
They're coming back.
How many kills does he have right now? What are we thinking?
I think he's on 6 or 7.
Christ.
But they're coming back. They got them trapped in P1 right now.
Nate, you can push
This
up
is ideal right now.
Yeah, they got them trapped. They hit the comeback.
Oh, Doug, what are we doing?
And where is Doug going?
Doug, right there. We play for the guy in art while Shawnee holds that P1. Christ. Oh, Jesus.
That is a breakdown right there.
Oh, Jesus.
Lau's gonna be like P1 truck, guys.
They need a big break here.
I just don't think it's coming. Oh, Jesus. It's the bad news bears. Team Nade.
P1 truck is dead.
Yeah, you're
Doug just gave up a cut to go watch what his teammate was watching and sit on top of his teammate. They got 2-piece. He's looking at apparitions in the bush.
Oh, dude.
Oh.
It's very simple why he's not number 1 or number 6 or 5 or 4 or 3 or 2. There's other players that have more accolades than he has. That's the reason we all play, is for the accolades of winning. And if I'm being completely honest, if I'm being genuinely honest, I really think Seth did a terrible job of picking his teammates over his years. When I teamed with Seth, we didn't lose maps. We literally never lost maps. I was one of the best OBJs, one of the best Slayers. He always picks Slayers in his career because I think Seth could have won a lot more than he won. And if he won a lot more than he won, he would be GOAT in my mind. I would have him as number one. I really think that in this, and I'm only talking CDL era, guys. I'm not talking prior to CDL era. Once he went to CDL, I think he could have won a lot more in CDL.
So Methodz especially was roasting Doug a fair bit for his performances there. I think it's always interesting in a way because, yes, Doug might not be the greatest player nowadays. Methodz recently retired, but Doug's career has managed to last longer than Methodz has. And in fairness, if you were to create a list of the greatest all-time Call of Duty players, like Doug is probably above Zilly, to be fair. Like Doug had more event wins, especially back in the day, but you know, whatever. This comment on Scump not being COD's number one, I mean, okay, to me, Crimsix is going to be number one. I think it's going to be very difficult for anyone to stop that in terms of pure accolades. In terms of what he's done for COD, obviously Scump's clear number one. It depends on your criteria. But Scump is at minimum top 3, I think, in everyone's list. Some might still have Karma above Scump, depending on what you think about World Championships and how important they are. Of course, Clayster has 3 rings now. He's in the conversation. But, you know, Doug had all of those guys above Scump. And the clip he says here I thought was kind of remarkable, like that Scump did a bad job of choosing his teammates throughout his career. When they teamed up together back in the day, I don't believe they ever played on like an official roster together, but I guess he means it just when they just squatted up and stuff, they wouldn't even lose maps. And he says that maybe Scump should have chosen him to be his teammates rather than the guys that Scump actually chose. But then you look at Scump's career and you see that he played with Crim, Karma and Formal for a large period, and all those 3 players are also top 5 all-time players. Like, I don't think Scump made bad decisions with his rosters because, you know, if he did, he wouldn't be revered as the player he is today with all the accolades that he had. So I don't really know what Doug was getting at there, just at one of these weird Doug Censor Martin texts that comes over from time to time, but also Doug's individual performance will always get roasted when he plays challenges and doesn't have a particularly good series. Intrigued to hear your thoughts on it all in the comment section below. Also wanted to mention this from Slactor. I thought it was crazy that Slactor got to 10,000 Twitch subscribers. This is super impressive. I'm really happy for him, right? Because Slactor's a player. I think it goes to show that if you're like a former pro player, that, you know, Slactor wasn't known for being like a massive personality or anything, right? He was one of the quieter pros that are people, okay, more underrated player, but people didn't really talk about him that much while he was a professional player. But since he's retired, he's gone on to be a streamer and has been doing incredibly well. I believe he's streaming on like TikTok as well to kind of bring people over to his Twitch channel. But the fact that Slactor is able to get 10k subs on Twitch was an incredibly impressive accomplishment. Shows that any pro player that is currently competing needs to take their content game seriously, because even if they're not like, Slactor wasn't a big content guy when he was around in the scene, and in my opinion he's not like the most entertaining personality you're gonna find, but the fact that he's able to achieve this with some grind and some hustle shows that a lot of these pro players should take this way more seriously. And it's also cool to see that former pros can actually find like a full-time career doing stuff like this, even if they're not the Scumps of the world, even if they weren't on OpTic, right? And aBeZy as well has been killing it with several thousand subs as well after he's retired. So really cool stuff. I know that Slactor isn't even part of an organization right now, which may be something he is still considering. And also just a quick note, because of Prime, we've we're kind of hoping, right, that we're not going to have the return to YouTube anytime this season. It might happen next year, we can't really control that, but we're hoping at least it's going to stay on Twitch until the end of this year. And it probably will, because Major 4 is going to get presented by Citadel on Prime. I'm guessing like some sort of new show or something, right? But anyway, they're partnering up with Prime, and of course Prime, Amazon Prime Video, they own Twitch. So there's clearly some sort of partnership in place here, which probably means that this kind of Amazon CDL Twitch relationship is probably being maintained for the time being, because they wouldn't be advertising a Prime thing on a YouTube deal, I imagine. That probably wouldn't make much sense. And just if you guys want something else to read and listen to, there was a really interesting article that BBC Newsbeat did on Kells, right? Of course, the first player we talked a couple of months ago to qualify for the Call of Duty Challengers Elite. BBC did an article on her. I thought it was a really interesting read, and well, hopefully she can qualify again in the near future. But very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.